Jewish community is actually very, very broad. It's very kind of fractious and robust, and that's not true of all communities, really. So I think it is more.
Yeah, except for the Oriental Baptists.
Those Oriental
That's
Baptists
right.
are hard to top, but you know, you render unto Caesar. They're unbeatable,
Right,
so we just do our best.
But yeah, I mean, I think as far as coming out with the balance between individual freedom and communal responsibility, I think Judaism comes out with the best balance, because that's a very difficult, tightrope.
Yeah.
But they've worked it out over thousands of years. They've recorded minority opinions in the Talmud and the ongoing rabbinic discussions.
Right.
And so, we've learned how to both live with some diversity of thought. My dad had this saying: in essentials, unity; in non-essentials, liberty; in all things, charity.
In essentials,
In essentials, unity.
Yeah.
In non-essentials, liberty.
Right.
In all things, charity.
I like that.
Yeah,
So
I
it
like
sounds
that.
good, but like Judaism's not nearly as beautiful, sounding. It's much more prosaic, but it's like, it does something that works.
But there are, I never. A lot of times when reading this, I'll go with the literal reading and I'll be titillated by it. But there are also ways to approach this metaphorically that jump out at me. I mean, I mentioned to Luke yesterday I was in the South Bay with this community of very kind of Western esoterics, I think they call themselves, but they're astrologists and so forth. There's 12 symbols of the zodiac, and that's consistent within Hinduism, that you have each god is kind of a projection of one aspect of human nature, and that you learn about kind of navigating the world and humanity by paying attention to the gods. So I was looking at the 12, these 12 tribes, and that this is the last section in the Torah, and I was thinking, if you approached it that way, each of these tribes represents something intrinsic to human nature. So within each of us is these tribes in greater or lesser proportions. Are there learning opportunities in here? And that may be the case. And so I'm saying that is, I think that there are legitimate ways of approaching the text that are more gentle, that reread it as more gentle.
And then the opposite way of looking at it is all these tribes but two got wiped out, and really Benjamin disappeared, so really only one of these tribes survived.
Right.
So, like, for all the beautiful things it says about a lot of these tribes, they all got wiped out in 622 or 722 before the Common Era, so really only Judah survived.
And it's scary because, like, for the tribe of Benjamin, that's one of the things I have in here. This reads, the section on Benjamin says it's 33:12. It says, of Benjamin he said, beloved of the Lord, he rests securely beside him. Ever does he protect him as he rests between his shoulders. So, and between his shoulders, we just it's seen on the Wikipedia entry that it says that this is a reference to the temple, because the temple was built, and for some reason that's between Benjamin's shoulders. Well, so I read this as kind of a meek shall inherit the earth type of thing. The meek will be protected, and the meek will inherit kind of. Except that he wasn't protected and he got obliterated. And the temple was destroyed as well. So both the meek and the goodness of and Revelation were cleansed. So that's too bad. But yeah.
What things jump out at you, Monica, about this Torah portion?
One of the things, 33:17. He's speaking to Joseph here. His first bullet has splendor, the horns of the wild ox, his horns. With them he shall gore the peoples together, the ends of the earth. Unity comes through violence? I mean, is that...
Yeah, it does.
Is that what's being said here? Gore the peoples together.
Yeah, mine says, with his horns he gores the peoples, the ends of the earth, one and all. I like that because it's about Joseph, so it makes me feel good about myself. But yeah, I mean, and he's talking, and they're talking here about how all of Joseph's wonderful privilege. He has the both, at night and during the day his crops are good, and he has all these blessings. And then it reads to me like this is, and what do you do with your blessings when you're blessed? Man, you wield them like horns, you gore the peoples of the earth, one and all. So, is it violence or?
Sounds pretty violent.
It sounds violent. I mean,
maybe it just feels like violence when it's happening. I mean, think about the story of Joseph. I mean, how does he, ultimately at the end of the story, how does he bring the family back together through what feels like a violence, right? Through holding Benjamin back and sending the rest of the brothers back to their father.
Right.
Right. So there seems to be violence, but in the end it's not, so.
Well, I like that interpretation, and I think that, like, it reminds me of Machiavelli. Machiavelli's got a bad name. We think he just means violent, but not. Really, it's not. It's about doing what you have to do to produce good outcomes. And for someone in a position of power, often it looks ugly, but it's for the best. This is, I guess, a synopsis of Machiavelli's argument. So here you're saying you got all these blessings, so you use them, man. You use them, and you go. I mean, it's going to look ugly. It'll look like violence. It'll look bloody. But
it's so dangerous, though, to give somebody that kind of power and authority. To say, use whatever violent means necessary. If you see, I mean, it's the ends justifying the means, and
right.
Who can we trust with that kind of power? I mean, that's the scary thing.
Well, that's why we tell Muslims that they need to engage with the inherent violence of their scripture, because the scripture is problematic, because it,
right.
Okay, Jewish physician, heal yourself. I mean,
Okay, now we've reached the point where Joey gives up his chair to his moral leader.
it would be a pleasure.
And you can sit on the pillows or wherever you like. You can arrange the pillows. You can sing and dance.
I have, yeah.
So what else grabs your attention, Monica?
Let's see here. I also think it's interesting. I mean, as a just from a purely literary perspective. Now, this is the one that's added on at the end, right? Or scholars believe this is
right.
the one that's a
That's
much later addition.
I believe this all came from God 3,200 years ago.
Right. Not that it didn't come from God; it just came from God in a different
later.
mood.
God, like
right?
600
God's
years
different
later.
every time he shows up in Torah.
Right.
It's interesting because it's as if Moshe isn't Moshe anymore. He is appropriating the traditions and structures of other people, of other cultures. Just going back to 33:12, where he is speaking to Benjamin. There's this really interesting idea of God dwelling between his shoulders. What is that? And then,
God dwelling between his shoulders?
Right?
Or
He dwells securely upon him. He surrounds him every day as between. Okay,
his shoulders.
This is one of the instances I love in Torah where it's ambiguous. It could go either way.
What's the verse again?
33:12. To Benjamin, he said, the beloved of Yah, whatever. He dwells securely upon him. He surrounds him every day. As between his shoulders he dwells. Who's his and who's he? It could go either way. It could be God dwelling between the shoulders. It could be Benjamin dwelling between the shoulders of God. Right. But either way, this is a reference to the one God of Egypt, right? That's what mine is saying. Where a god in the guise of a hawk sits upon the shoulder or back of the one to be protected. So, this version is interpreting it as God sitting on the back or sitting on the shoulders of Benjamin, right? But it's interesting because where does this language come from, right? It's coming from surrounding cultures and surrounding gods and surrounding myths and surrounding ideas about God, which always is fascinating to me. And then, the whole structure of Deuteronomy 33, it's a blessing that mirrors the deathbed blessing of Yitzhak. No. Isaac's deathbed blessing, or is it Jacob's?
No,
Jacob would have been blessing his
of Jacob's deathbed blessing, yeah.
Right, okay, that's right. So, it's as if he's taking from other stories that he's heard and putting something together.
Mm-hmm. And I think, that's interesting about taking the ideas from other cultures, because Judaism's not that into, to the extent that I've seen it, that into the body, but a lot of other traditions are very conscious of what goes on in the body, and between the shoulders is a place where other traditions have identified that men is storing fear, that fear is stored as tension between the scapulae. So in a way, and that may sound kind of foofy, but I mean, it would be taken very seriously, like in Hinduism or Buddhism.
Mm.
So the idea